Hi, pals. Time for the next level of response in our literature response model. As you might recall the big picture, there are 5 levels of response. We've already done level 1 and level 2, so now we're at level 3, the analytical response. I also want you to recall that the model is recursive, which means that you will always be going back and forth between the various levels of response. But the reason we put level 3 after level 1 and level 2 is because level 1 ensures that they are comprehending at the most basic level. They're getting the facts of the story so that they are able to talk about it. And level 2 ensures a kind of connection with them. And as we've been talking about in class, I think we need to move it from beyond just that personal I feel or I connect to it, but also to what issues is the text raising, or what issues are the text raising, or the text is raising what issues, whatever, that somehow or other are significant to me. So we can move it away from the touchy-feely for those of us who are not particularly touchy-feely. But once they've sort of got that interest in the text for whatever reason, and once we're sure they're understanding the text, only then can we begin to move them to analyzing what's actually going on in the text. So as you'll recall, the model is about making cognitive and affective connections between the reader and the text. And the cognitive we think of as the head, and the affective we think of as the heart in a sort of sappy way. And the analytical level is clearly going to be a cognitive relationship with the text. So let's take a look again at our Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive processes, because you'll see that we've already gone through the sort of remember phase. And as I mentioned previously, Bloom doesn't really make a lot of room for that personal connection that we have come to value. And at level 3, we're moving more to these analytical skills. And you see the language there. And they're not all appropriate, but you know what analysis entails, because we could also say the items that we see in understanding are, which is the second column, are equally significant at the 3rd level of response. In addition, I want you to take a look here at the knowledge dimension. And we didn't look at this in level 2, but I want us to look at it again now, because one of the challenges that people have been having is with that difference between understanding and doing on the Understanding by Design lesson plan format. And I want you to think that the understanding is sort of like knowledge, so connected to the knowledge dimension. And if you think about what students will understand as a prerequisite to performing the skills under the objectives, then this chart can be particularly helpful to you, because it talks about those broad understandings, the broad knowledge that students need to have in order to complete the more task-oriented objectives that we've established for them. So take a second and look at this chart and begin to think about how you can use these as understanding. Now, you would have to tweak them. For example, look under, I think I have look under procedural, and notice I placed the arrow between procedural and conceptual because I think we're talking about both at level 3. So you would say the procedural is knowledge of subject-specific skills. Well, now we're in English language arts, so I don't even know what an algorithm is, so we'll just skip that. But now we're in this area of English language arts, and we're talking about literature here, and we're talking about reading. So the student might have knowledge of authorial techniques for character development. And then what are they going to do? They're going to examine the difference between a round and a flat character and be able to identify those differences. Do you see what I mean? They have to first understand what characters are before they can get to the nitty-gritty of character analysis. So always ask yourself, what do they have to know or understand before they can do the task that I'm trying to assign to them in this particular learning objective? So let's move on. Damn, I keep going too far. I gotta figure out how to make it go slower. Maybe I should use the enter button. I'll try that on my next one. Anyway, here are the skills we're addressing at this level, and these are just a few of the skills. There are far more. And in fact, I don't know. Wait, I'm gonna roll around in my chair. Hang on. Sit there while I'm doing this. I don't know whether Stacy showed you guys the quick flip questions for critical thinking and quick flip questions for reading comprehension. I'm going to bring them to school with me. I'm putting them on the side of my desk. Betsy, send me an email. And I will, and we can take a look at these and I can show you how to order them off of Amazon. They're like $3. Anyway, they give you a lot of the kind of verbs that you can use. And yeah, you can find them online, but these are sort of like cute little accoutrements to your teaching. Now I'm going to hit enter instead of click. So you'll recall this is our transaction, right? The reader and the text in our transaction. And together they make meaning. Are you enjoying my flying in? And I would venture to say that I think level 1 and level 2 thus far have been focusing on the reader. Even though the factual is really about the text, in a sense, we're ensuring that the reader is comprehending the text. So they are related, but it's not an interpretive moment in their learning. It's more, can you figure out just the plain facts, just the facts, ma'am, of the text? Now, our focus is turning to the text. And remember, this is where so many critics of reader response begin to make their, stake their claim about what's wrong with it. The text is relegated to a secondary position. The text is subordinate to the reader's interpretation. We don't believe that. We believe in the integrity of the text, and therefore we give it equal measure, that there is no meaning without the text or the reader. And that's got to be what you emphasize to them by showing them this graphic, I mean a better version of it, or the one in the Appleman text, but showing them that these are on an equal plane. It's not that their opinion or their experiences are more significant. We're simply saying they are significant to the transaction, as significant as is the text itself and what the text brings. So think for a minute about what it means to analyze literature, because this is what we spend most of our time doing in college, I hope. It's where students offer their ideas and support them with evidence. So this is a writing activity in many ways, right? They have to, or it's a preparation for writing. Stake a claim and offer me some data, and then explain the connection through your warrant. They are empowered to voice conflicting opinions. There's nothing wrong with students disagreeing about something. I think it's great if students say that, Scout's a brat. I think it's great that they say Huck is a little shit. I think it's terrific when they recognize that Jim is the hero of Huck Finn, yada yada. Students are taught how to avoid value judgments. What we're trying to get to, especially here as we're talking about analysis, this is not criticism, this is analysis. We want them to be able to analyze the text and say intelligent things about the text by staking a claim and offering evidence from the text. The critical evaluation, those value judgments, come later. The problem is that students are too swift to offer those opinions without really thinking analytically, critically, about the text overall. That's why we put that critical value judgment element of teaching literature at the end of the model, not at this phase. Finally, they're asked to move beyond their personal narrative, their particular experience, as I was just saying. They're asked to say, okay, this is how you feel. Let's see what the text actually does. Let's see what the text is bringing to the table. So the question is, what are you going to study at this grade? There's so many elements. I don't know if you have a Holman Handbook of Literature, or Handbook to Literature. If you don't, you should get one. God, it's such an old book. You can probably get it. You'll pay more for the shipping on Amazon than you will for the text itself. But it has all those literary terms, and it's all the literary terms, and they are all in one place. And yes, I know you can get them online, but sometimes you all go to unreasonable sources. I went to watch somebody teach setting the other day, and to them setting was location. No, setting is season. Setting is time of day. Setting is weather. Setting is far more complicated than just the physical location or the geographical location of a text or where a story takes place. And therefore, I want you to recognize that setting is more complex. Holman has that in it. It's not some bullshit thing put up by some AP teacher. Sorry. Rant over. So what do the standards seek at this grade? That's significant. You also want to know what the standards sought at previous grades and what they're going to be seeking in the grades after yours. So you really need a sense of the reading standards, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. What can your students comprehend at this grade? We've been talking, notice I don't have any question marks there. I've got to go back and put those in. Anyway, what can students comprehend at this grade? You have to work at the level they come in at. Oh, that's a lot of prepositions. But you've got to know where they start, and you've got to move them to the top end of their zone of proximal development. You've got to take them to their higher order skills. But you can't start with complicated ideas if they don't have the groundwork. So you've got to assess what they know. KWL, simple conversation, even an overview of the definitions or an overview of the terms. Here are the things we're going to learn in this unit. Let's see which ones you're familiar with, and let's see which ones you're familiar with and which ones you don't know. And then you just say to them, this is where we're going to be going in this unit. You're going to have students who are going to be at different levels of ability, right? We've been talking about this. So what can you do to differentiate? I have to close the parentheses there. This is very sloppy. So what can you do to differentiate the learning? Some students might be able to move on to metaphor and metonymy and synecdoche. Some might just be fighting to figure out the difference between a round and flat character. So you've got to be able to find a text where you can address all of those. And this is, again, where group work helps. And then for what skills have you prepared them with their level 1 and level 2 instruction? As I keep saying to you over and over and over again, I iterate and reiterate. What we do in methods class is, and especially in phase 3 as well, is have you work on discrete lessons. That's not what teaching is. Teaching is a process of accruing information. And so you need to be thinking every time you design a lesson of how you're going to use this instruction later in this unit. This is why we map curriculum. This is why we build unit plans, so that we can see where we're going to address the skills at the beginning that we will bring back at later and during later discussions or in later activities. When I taught in Laredo at A&M, I would make them attach a calendar, and on the calendar they would write level 1 topic, level 2, and then they would show how the stuff that they taught at the beginning played its way out all the way to the end. Those were in days when I made people write 3 unit plans of about 15 lessons in a single semester. I've gotten too easy. Maybe next semester. Anyway, I want to take a look at the reading, writing, and communicating standards, because I know you probably did them in 308, or you're going to be doing them in 308, or maybe you did or didn't, or maybe you didn't pay attention. But I want us to make these standards our Bible. I love the standards. You know, I love Common Core. I even love the Colorado Academic Standards, and I've learned to love the PARCC test, just not what they're doing with it. So I picked grade 9, Reading for All Purposes, and under they have this at the beginning, and I'm going to give you the links later on. And if you have not been to the CAS site and you haven't been to the Common Core sites, shame on you. Don't tell me that, because I'll be very upset. Anyway, at the beginning of the grade 9 standards, they list some grade level expectations at a glance. So they're just a couple of them for each reading, writing, communicating, and whatever the other one is, researching. So the reading for all purposes are right here, right? That they should be moving to increasingly complex literary elements in traditional and contemporary works of literature, right? So they should be looking at them, they should be comparing them, they should be scrutiny means analysis, yes? Okay. And increasingly complex informational texts, right? So that we make them more mature, more sophisticated in their skills of interpretation and study. This is why I love the To Kill a Mockingbird workbook. This is why I love what we're going to do with King Cole. It's showing you that you can have informational text alongside literary text and not somehow or other give short shrift to either. With all due respect to Kelly Gallagher, fucking use your head and bring in some informational text to support literature, dude. So grade 9, this is what, when we get to the specific standards for grade 9 in reading, we get to what prepared graduates can do and the concepts and skills students should master. Wide range of literature. Notice there's not a book there. It doesn't dictate anything. Let me just rant a little. Because we were looking for universal themes and the human experience, i.e. essential questions. Universal themes and the human experience. This goes back to level 2, right, where I said you don't want the touchy-feely crap. So you can focus on what is it in the human experience that students can connect with. How is this human experience like my human experience? Oh, and what can I learn from that human experience? oh, what can I rehearse through literature so I don't make the same fucked up mistakes other people do when it comes to face them in real life? And then the concepts and skills students master. Increasingly complex literary elements in traditional and contemporary works. I mean, hello, what that we just saw that. I don't understand why people say it bombs, it eliminates canonical literature. Teachers eliminate canonical literature by being lazy ass. The standards don't. And here are the evidence outcomes. Here are the things that students have to be able to do, and you have to be able to provide evidence that they can do them. It's an outcome for which you have evidence. When I say what students will understand or what students will know, that's not an evidence outcome. I'm not expecting you to be able to show me knowledge and understanding because they're not measurable. But evidence outcomes are things that can be measured. These are the things that the state feels that they have every right to test because they have asked you to teach them. So I've highlighted in red the sort of literary analysis terms. And by the way, if you don't know this, you should be able to see that each Colorado academic standard is aligned with a Common Core state standard. That's the parenthetical at the end, but you probably know that. Anyway, determining a theme or a central idea, analyzing the text over the course of the text, right? So they're beginning to think about that, the themes, the ideas, the characters, images, not just at one section. It's not just, oh, it's the second week of our unit and today is character day. No, they're doing it all the way. This is where graphic organizers can be so helpful. Pull out your character chart, pull out your Freytag's pyramid, pull out your timeline, and let's see where we are now. Just those are such important tools. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? You want to talk about specific details. Anytime somebody says something, where do you see that in the text? Where do you see that? Where did you see that? Oh, show us in the text. Read that passage for us. God, it's so easy. Provide an objective summary, right? We've already talked about summary skills in level 1, so now we're building on that same skill. Excellent. Analyze characters, so those with conflicting motivations. Why are they doing this? Remember we talked about the, oh damn, I'll never remember what the terms are because I'm so senile. Hang on. The action consequence, right? So actions and consequences and motivations, all of those are terms that we're going to use throughout any discussion of a novel or a poem, right? And once again, notice develop over the course of a text. Interact with other characters. How do characters get along? Major characters, minor characters, flat characters, round characters, static characters, dynamic characters. All the language of literary study that you can introduce to them, but you're introducing them in the context of what's happening in the story. How does the plot move? What does the writer do to make the plot move? What are key moments of plot? Oh, Freytag's pyramid, does the work for you. The third bullet is, what are the author's choices about the structure of a text, especially texts that use flashback or, I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird does that, correct? I mean, it starts and she's going to tell us a story. So that's important. Why do it that way? Why not just insert us into the story as it's happening? Why is it some sort of reflection? What about the order of events? Especially parallel plots. Think about what's happening in Shakespeare, right? Where you have the main characters, then you always have the rustics doing the same old shit, but it's supposed to be funny. What about time, pacing? You know, how do they send us back and forth in a play or a poem or a novel, through flashbacks or through hints about what's coming, and how the writers create tension or surprise or mystery. Those are the kinds of close reading skills that we really want to develop so that students begin to think about what an author does, because they are then reading like writers and writing like readers, a phrase that we've heard. I think, Joanna, you've been using it. Anyway, this idea that we have to think about what choices writers make at all levels, whether they're writing fiction or nonfiction, and then we have to think about those choices in our own writing. And that's how you begin to teach writing and literature at the same time. Let's take a look at the next set of evidence outcomes. See, I click on the arrow, it doesn't go. I got to do it by hand. Here we go. There's some more evidence outcomes. They're asking you to analyze point of view. Through whose eyes are we seeing this? What about the cultural experience? All the stuff that we're talking about in the background of To Kill a Mockingbird. how did those experiences, cultural doesn't just mean multicultural, how do those experiences um, create how a character acts? And if we begin to study it in a character like Scout, well, then suddenly we can begin to understand how experiences impact characters who are not from the same culture we are in, let's say, Things Fall Apart. And then what kind of world literature can you bring in? This is really interesting. It's not so much interesting in To Kill a Mockingbird for me, because I think of that as particularly time bound, but it's probably not. In fact, it might be that more contemporary works from European authors have to do with race relationships than they have in a long time. Let me explain that. I mean, for the longest time, European culture was homogenous, and I always used to think, well, they can't understand the race challenges we have in the United States because they really don't have those kinds of challenges there. Yes, Britain has had some, but for the most part, European countries are homogenous. But now we've got um, refugees and settlers from from Africa and from the Middle East pouring into European countries, and they are suddenly having to deal with the kind of race issues that we've been having for 150 years. So it's our chance to sort of laugh at them and say, yeah, now it's your chance to feel what it's like to have to try and balance people of different cultures and beliefs and values, et cetera, in a single political system. Yeah, 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 yeah. Anyway, but with King Cole, what's really cool to me is that Zola, Émile Zola, the French author's novel Germinal, is really very much like King Cole. I think it's a better novel because Zola is a brilliant writer. But the point, it's also about miners who revolt in the lives that they live. It's really gritty. It's the kind of naturalism that was the foundation of American naturalism in the 19th century. Frank Norris, the American naturalist writer who wrote The Octopus, and McTeague, which a lot of you, yeah, he wrote McTeague, which a lot of you might have read, um, adored Germinal and thought that Zola was genius. Anyway, that was a long aside, a long tangent. Anyway, what are the characters that distinguish literary forms and genres? We use the word genre incorrectly. We use the word mode incorrectly. The modes of literature are fiction, nonfiction, poetry, drama. You could say prose. Um, and I would say film now, and possibly graphic novels. The genres are tragedy, comedy, the lyric, the sonnet, the Senecan play, those kinds of things. And so I would love us to start to use the right terms. Notice that in bullet 3, it's how the author draws on and transforms source material. By that, I think we're talking about allusions as well, right? How do they allude to other texts? Finally, using literary terms. But I can't ask you enough. Please don't give them the term until you've discussed what the term is, and then you give it to them at the end. We call this setting. We call this around character. Let them learn and understand what it is before you name it. Then here, by the end of grade 9, this is the last bullet, they should read and comprehend literature, including stories, dramas, and poems. Notice the Oxford comma, yay, in the grades 9, 10 text complexity band proficiently, with scaffolding as needed at the high end of the range. We want them to be reading at the high end of the range, and the complexity band we can talk about. But what we really want to be thinking about is the zone of proximal development. What is it that they can do? Let's get them to the high end. Now, one of the things that I think people frickin' ignore in the Common Core standards is Appendix B, which gives you texts and exemplars, and we're going to take a look at this. I would urge you to print out all of these things. It is long. They are hundreds of pages long, but it is a phenomenal tool to have. So if you ever have extra money, do that. There might be an address on the site where you can order copies of these, actually. That might be cheaper, but I don't know. Or if you work someplace, get them to do it. They're online. They're PDFs. They're Word docs. There's nothing that keeps you from getting everything you need online, but I'm still a hard copy gal. Anyway, here are the examples of the texts that the Common Core puts in Appendix B. These are not the Colorado Academic Standards. These are the Common Core state standards. And they have an appendix with recommended texts, or not Recommended. Take that back. Scratch recommended. Exemplars. The kinds of text they're talking about for reading at this grade level. And they do it for every single grade level. So look, and by the way, the page numbers correspond to excerpts of the text that are at those page numbers. So it's a really handy dandy little thing. All the poems are there that they'll mention in completeness. Look at the level of difficulty in these various texts, from Voltaire to Gogol to Kafka to something as simple as The Gift of the Magi. All of these are the diversity of text and a textability that you can use. They're not saying you should, they're just exemplars. But here's some more of them. I think my screen goes through all the way. Yeah. So you've got Grapes of Wrath on the one hand and To Kill a Mockingbird, the Joy Luck Club. Look at the level of difficulty of these. This is where we're trying to get students. Oh, brave new world, when students can read these books in grade 9 and 10, and then they can come to college and we can actually work with them on more complicated ideas. Holy crap. Reading Oedipus, reading Macbeth, reading Tennessee Williams. I hate the Glass Menagerie. Don't make them read that. Then look at the poems, right? The Raven, Emily Dickinson, Ozymandias. And all of these poems, by the way, are in the back on those page numbers, the complete poems. And then they have there, you see this? Oh, wait, I think I have an arrow. Sample performance tasks for stories, drama, and poetry. They give you some samples of the kinds of tasks they believe would fulfill the kinds of, would help develop the kinds of skills that they want students to have at this grade level. So here they are. I just pasted them in. Analyzing the character of Odysseus from the Odyssey reflects conflicting motivations, right? How his conflicting loyalties, plot, and theme. Just look at the big words. I mean, not the big words, the red words. How do they create tension? How does pacing and ordering of events? How does the structure of the story help develop a particular theme, right? What about the idea of relationships between mothers and daughters? Here's a complete development of theme over the course of a novel. Here's a comparison between Kurosawa's Throne of Blood and Shakespeare's Macbeth. Kurosawa also did, what's the one that's Lear? I can't remember. Anyway, no, Rashomon? I think that's, no, not Rashomon. He didn't do Rashomon. I can't think of it. Anyway, and then students' artistic representations. I love this, how the same character or site or event is represented in multiple modes: art, poetry, film. I mean, these are interesting. These are interesting teaching ideas. These are interesting conversations. They're not fucking reviewing for the park exam. You don't have to do that. The park exam doesn't want the kind of shit that people have been doing in classrooms as exam preparation. So let's look at some of the writing tasks that you can do at this level, and then many, many more, but these are just some general ones that are at the most basic level, but great for starting out as you begin to enter into the classroom. Graphic organizers, by the way, serve as outlines for writing tasks, right? They just, if you have them complete a graphic organizer, that can become their kind of working outline. So comparison and contrast of characters, right? That's always a good idea. Freytag's pyramid is the plot pyramid that we've already looked at. Character maps, so we can trace their evolution. Action consequence maps, where we talk about what the actions are, we talk about the results, and then suddenly we can introduce the idea of motivation. Why did they do that? What did they think was going to happen? How did what happened not be what they thought was going to happen? Predictions and conjectures. We've already talked about the idea of predicting. You don't just predict at the beginning, you predict throughout. Well, now that we've finished chapter 5, what do you think is going to happen next? And why do you think that? What has the writer done to set you up to think that way? And that's what I mean about conjecturing about the choices the author makes. I keep forgetting to close my parentheses. What are the aesthetic elements that the author uses? The skills, the craft, the technique that allows them to make you think a certain way about what's going to happen next. Or why did he decide to do it this way? Or why did she create this kind of a character? Why, is one character so hateful? Why is this character so naive? How does that further the author's plot intentions? Journal prompts always, the beginning journal prompt, always a good go-to. That moves students from their level 2 focus to consider literary elements. So you could even have them go back to a journal prompt that they wrote about a character and then begin to ask them, well, you wrote that this is your favorite character. Why? What is it about this character? Give me some character traits that made you think that way. And this way, the journal becomes a living document that you go back and forth to. And then pre-instruction, discussion, before you teach, before you discuss particular literary elements, ask them a question about it. So tell me what happened in the plot. What was the most important plot event that you saw in this section? Tell me where the section we read for homework took place. Give me the setting. Again, not just place, but weather, time of day, etc., season. Something, any questions about any of these. And you'll notice that these are different. Questions about tone, questions about symbol are far more complex than questions about setting. So here's another way to differentiate your instruction. And then there are questions about authorial technique or author's choices or the author's craft. Why did the author choose blank to happen, right? How did the author develop Scout in this section? What changed about her? What's different? How did we learn something new about her? What did the author use? Was it something Scout said, something somebody said about Scout, Scout's relationship with another character, when we think about Scout and Calpurnia, for example? Would changing the setting make a difference? How did the author create tension or make you laugh, cry, feel anger, etc.? How did the author elicit an emotion? We're talking about catharsis all the time, right? I know students always talk to me about frickin' catharsis. I'm like, oh, really? That's all they can do is define it. What does an author do to create that cathartic experience for you? What was it that happened? That's the analysis. Do you think the author had an audience in mind? Who's Harper Lee writing to? Who's Huck Finn writing to? That gets a little more analytical. That gets into who's the author, biographical elements. Those are perfectly legit. Additional writing tasks, some of my favorites. You have to give an essay exam because students are going to write essay exams in college, so you might as well try doing it with this. Please don't give them the kind of essay exam where they can write it at home or bring in note cards. That's not the purpose of an essay exam. An essay exam is designed to determine whether they've been doing their work and following what's going on. And therefore, it should not be, oh, bring in your note cards. It can be, if you want them to be able to have access to the text so that they can cite specifically, that's another thing. But I hate, oh, I'll give you the questions and then you can come in and write. That's like bullshit. Resumes and college entrance exams, as I said, look at those prompts. I posted them on the Facebook page. They are terrific. They're terrific for that. Students are going to have to write college entrance exams, or they're going to have to create a resume. You might as well have them do it now. Now, Colorado Department of Education and the Common Core State Standards are not the enemy, and so I want you to start to take a look at some of the tools that they have. The Common Core site, there's their home web address. There's the web address that takes you specifically to the English Language Arts, and there's Appendix B. You can just Google Common Core State Standards, and it'll take you to all these sites. The CDE site, there's the reading, writing, and communicating site that's specific to that area, and then that's the link to the actual academic standards for each site. You should have them by now. They are available both in Word and PDF. I always suggest you use Word so you can cut and paste with them. Now, the Reading, Writing, Communicating site has some excellent resources on it. One is this Literacy Design Collaborative, and they have a series of modules. As with everything, you can't use the module as it is. You need to adapt it to your situation, to your context, but it's an outstanding tool. There's some pretty cool resources on it. There's a site, I don't even know what PLC stands for. I feel I'm very Park or something, I don't know. It should be something. Oh, thank you. Never mind. Ignore it. I just read it. Professional Learning Community. Skip this whole beginning here. Sorry about that. Because I never really use it. I just click on the link. Anyway, these are, what I like here is the Park Assessment Writing Rubric, because that is what you're getting your students able to write. Stacy and I took a sample Park. I think I told you about this maybe. And I was horrified because there's no way a student could do it. And then I thought, and I said, wouldn't it be great if they could? And I think the point of the test is that we begin to see where we want students to be. My concern, of course, is that we're not using it that way. We're not using it as a baseline to show us what we don't know and where we want to go. We're using it to punish students for what they don't know now, which is really stupid. That is not a Common Core issue. That's not even a PARC issue. That's a bullshit state issue with idiots who don't read the standards. Rant over. Here are some instructional unit samples that were authored by Colorado teachers. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. FYI, our own Courtney Luce wrote some of these. Those are the good ones, but I'm not sure at what grade level. Anyway, these are all of these sites are places you should investigate because they are resources for you, as are Edutopia and Read, Write, Think. And if these are sites that you don't know, you must ask me in class so I can share them with you. And I think that's it for level 3. So I'm going to sign off, and I'm not going to listen to it, which I usually do before I post it because I don't feel like hearing my voice any longer. Sorry for my spaciness, but I think we got everything we need. Okay, I'm going to move over to close it. I have to use my thing. There we go. Okie doke. See you in class.